Beautiful day in Madison, Wisconsin. The sun is out, and that is good because we're going to be outside and a little bit off-site here in Madison as we get set for event number 6, the team Triplus. It'll be heat number 1 of event number 6 out at Lake Monona as they get a little bit of a warm-up swim this morning before we get underway in heat number 1. I'm Jeff Brywell alongside Chase Ingram, Amanda Krenz, and we are underway as they will take off. And going to be 80 athletes in the water at the same time here, Chase.
Yeah, it's not confusing at all doing a mass start and everybody's wearing a blue cap. I think the challenge here for these teams is trying to stay together on the swim. Once they have the 500-meter swim, they'll bring back the rescue sled, which we haven't seen since the games in California. And I think the whole event is here on the 500-meter swim. You want to get ahead of the rest of the field because what happens with the paddle in that rescue sled is that, and we've seen in years past, is it just jams up the whole field. Teams get stuck together. It's very cumbersome, especially on those turns. So what teams need to do is to get out early so they can get clear water going into the second portion of this event.
As they make their way toward the buoy, still shallow enough, you'll see a little bit of a walking in, waiting out there, and there goes the shelf. The swim will begin. Again, there are 19 teams in this first heat. 3 teams from Australia, 2 teams from Australia, 1 from New Zealand. 84 degrees is the temperature, 76 in the water.
Now, 84 sounds really nice, but when we were sitting outside, is that there isn't a cloud in the sky, so it's pretty hot, which means the run's going to be tough. 76 in the water, that sounds really nice. That's hot for water. I don't know if you're used to kind of like swimming in pools or anything, but the temperature differences in there, you want something more towards 70 to 72. It's going to feel a lot cooler. 76 is a warm swim.
The 2 teams from Australia, the 1 from New Zealand in this heat. CrossFit East, Tamaki sitting in 33rd, 121 and 26. Athletic, which you would expect to have some success. That's their 3 event wins in 23rd. A chance to jump up maybe into the top half of the standings if things play out right as they have in the past usually for these teams.
Well, I mean, you think about teams that have experience. You know, we said, do you have experience with the worm? Do you have experience with all these other implements at the games? Do you have experience with the water? Has such a massive advantage for not just an individual, but for a team itself. We see athletes out there taking some good big strokes. We also have some that are just sitting there paddling.
There's your top 10 in the standings after 5 events and 2 days of team competition. And Mayhem Freedom, 86-point lead, trying to go wire to wire as they did 2 seasons ago. Don't Stop made a big move to jump into second place with 368 points after that event win last night.
And that's the position they want to be. The problem is they want to be a little bit closer in the points between them and Mayhem. And here we see athletes separating themselves from the field. And these are very good swim strokes. We want to see they're long, they're efficient, comfortable in the water. Looking at eyesight, and the challenge for open water is twofold, right? You have, in a pool it's nice and calm, you're comfortable, you can see the bottom, you can stand up if you want to. In open water swimming, it's like you don't have that line at the bottom of the pool to guide you in a straight line. You also have, and we don't really have it this morning too much, but it's not the most easy of water to swim on. When there's a little bit of chop, there's not much this morning, but navigating where you're supposed to go. The sighting is the most challenging part, looking where you're supposed to go while you're swimming without actually stopping your stroke.
Again, this is heat 1 of 2 things, as you mentioned, Chase, can get a little bit disorienting out there. As you see a couple of the athletes starting to break away from the pack, but still a team event. So as we have seen on other events this week, other tests, it's going to be that either the 4th implement or the 4th athlete to come across, because once they get back to the landing area and get set to get the rescue sled, they have to have all 4 team members there till they can get back out into the water.
Right, so there's not a real advantage of getting way far ahead of the rest of your team if you are a good swimmer. However, if you're a decent swimmer, you don't have to go very hard to be better than people who don't know how to swim. And the advantage here is, like, yes, they're really far, but they probably are just relaxing. And that's the thing about swimming, is so different than other things we do in CrossFit, is that it's so technique dependent that you can have a very casual swim stroke and put 2-3 minutes on someone else in a 500 easily.
2 athletes out ahead will have no trouble getting around that buoy. They've already been around one. but things do get bunched up from time to time. We'll see it throughout the day. The buoy in the background, everyone looks like there's a few athletes still to make the turn around that orange buoy out far. But that's where things get bunched up, Chase, and you and I had talked about it before we went on the air. It may be worth the risk once it gets bunched up to take a wider turn to stay out of that mob. Yeah, we'll have to see how that kind of comes into play when we get to the sleds. One thing I'm curious about is how these top two athletes rank with the other two on their team. If they are actually on the same team, we'll see more once they get out of the water. But what you want to do is, when you got your group of four, someone's not going to enjoy the swim. Someone's been dreading this swim. Someone doesn't want to do this swim. There's also someone who's okay with it. You can, and what we see here, you can draft in swimming just as easily as we saw on the bike on the individual side, if not more easily. If you can keep your hands by your partner's feet, they will pull you through this entire race. So what you would want to see is get your best swimmer in front of your worst swimmer. You guys don't need to go fast, right? Going out ahead of your team, unless they're 2 feet behind you as well, isn't beneficial if you're leaving your teammate out to dry. Look at some of this. We have some just survival swim. I mean, no goggles, no cap. I don't really know what your thought process was there, unless you just never wanted to put your face under the water. But in that case, is that put your best swimmer in front of your worst swimmer and let them carry you through the first portion of this event. You'll see the lead they have right there. There are a couple of packs out ahead of the main pack, but things starting to separate a little bit. Once they get on the dock, the athlete with the chip timer will have an idea and be able to identify and let you know who is out in first, at least through the swim, and then they'll have a 500 sled paddle swim before they get to that 2,000-meter run back here to the Line Energy Center in the North Park Stadium. And as we're working through this, just looking at the names of the teams in heat number one, Dan was talking about it earlier at the desk, is CrossFit Athletic is in this heat. CrossFit Athletic has won every single swim event at the CrossFit Games that they have been a part of. So that's a major, chip in their favor when you have this swim event. Well, we have to do a little traffic control. The Ducks trying to enjoy the afternoon or the morning. Here come the 19 teams from heat number one. Now, once these athletes are done, they can get out of the water. They'll get some rest. And you can see, totally comfortable. And so he's just a good swimmer, and that's the advantage of having that, in the bag as far as the background's concerned. Is when you have a swimming background, it is more advantageous than having a weightlifting background in an Olympic lifting event here at the Games. It's more advantageous than being a gymnast when you're going to rings. Swimming is so difficult if you don't know how to do it. Just being, look at this. It's like they didn't even do a 500 swim in the water. That's the difference between being a good, comfortable swimmer and someone that's just trying to survive the race. Once they get on the sled, the rescue sled for the 500-meter paddle, they will all be together, but you can separate here in the swim. And Chase, interestingly enough, a couple of different strategies. You can go way ahead, get a little rest, or as you mentioned, if you're a swimmer in college, if you're a really good swimmer, have one of those swimmers, athletes that struggle, you said you might lay back, kind of encourage them, because you're going to be able to take it easy on the swim maybe while they're laboring a little bit more. And what that does, too, is that it conserves your energy. If it's going to take a long time for them to finish, you can conserve your energy for the second portion of this event, and that's the rescue sled. You can also put someone on the sled. So if you're not a good swimmer, you just say, look, go as hard as you can. I'm going to help you out as much as I can, and we'll throw you on top of that sled at least for the first portion so you can rest a little bit. Less bodies in the water, slowing that sled down actually isn't a bad idea. CrossFit East Tamaki is already on the dock, but that's just the athlete with a chip timer. They don't have all four of their athletes aboard yet. But their lead athlete got in at 8:03.45. They're out of Auckland, New Zealand. They were 5th in the Pacific, 189th worldwide. And if you look at the cross-reference, they were 30th overall coming into the Games this year. Multiple times of the Games, they have no event wins, so a chance maybe to grab an event win here today. A little bit of laboring there. A lot of bit of laboring right there. If the athletes do get in any kind of legitimate trouble out there in the swim, at the athlete briefing yesterday, just put the hand up, wave back and forth, draw the attention. As you see, we have a lot of people in the paddle boards and the boats out there to help these athletes if there is any trouble. And 40-minute time cap as we're nearing the 10-minute mark. Once all 4 team members get in, you must wait and then get to the sled paddle. Once they get on the rescue sled as well, Chase, they are allowed to have one athlete if they need to be on top of the sled. Remember the event where there was a 6-person team?
Yeah.
It was required you had one person on top of the sled. But if you need to, it's not required. All 4 can swim.
Well, and the idea is that, who do you put where when you get to the sled? Positioning is so important in CrossFit Athletic. There we go, picking up where they left off a few years ago. I mean, they haven't won a swim event since 2016. But every one they've had since then, they've won 16, 15, and 14. They weren't here at the games last year, so they didn't win that run, swim, run. But CrossFit Athletic, when you think swim events at the games for the teams, you think first place finishes.
So Athletic and Tamaki in there. Hustle Hard, Cape CrossFit, PBM, Galileo, 121, Bondel Gym, Butcher's Lab, all making their way to the ramp and now getting back into the water with this rescue sled paddle. It's going to be 500 meters. Athletes, all 4 athletes must keep their hand on the sled. Again, it is acceptable to have one athlete on the sled if you need to.
And the question is, what is the best way to use the rescue sled? It doesn't weigh very much. I mean, when it's in the water, it doesn't matter how much it weighs as long as it's floating. And as far as the size is concerned, is that's just an issue when you get jammed up on the turns. When you have Tamaki and Athletic, Tamaki kind of picked up where they left off last year. They got second to JST in the run, swim, run. Now, they weren't using a rescue sled, but they're comfortable in the water. And that's usually the biggest thing. You don't have to be a great swimmer. You just need to be comfortable in the water. Because when you start to panic, it's all over. So with Athletic on the left, Tamaki on the right, you see that kind of side stroke? Being in unison is super important. Because if you're not taking a stroke at the same time, you'll see that sled start to rock back and forth. And so if the person in front pulls forward while the other one's pulling back, you get that little tug of war between your teams. So there does need to be some communication, a lot like we see on the worm, is that when are we reaching forward? When are we pulling back? How are our legs kicking? But this side stroke, it's kind of like a combat survival swim you'll see the military do and teach, different than a normal freestyle stroke. You get that side pull and that side kick. If you do that in unison, I mean, it works out beautifully if you guys can do that together.
Interesting story, and one of the best things about coming to the CrossFit Games is to hear these stories, maybe of some adversity that athletes, whether individual or teams or age group, have overcome. CrossFit Athletic, we've talked about them quite a bit here with their success in swimming. One of their male athletes, Alessio Angelucci, 6 months ago in a cancer ward, but he's beaten Hodgkin's lymphoma and really had to battle. Has been undergoing chemo, but has been declared cancer-free, and amazing at 6 months ago in the cancer ward, but now out here at the 2018 Reebok CrossFit Games. Sitting 23rd after 5 events, but can move up into the top half of the field. They're doing a good job right now.
I mean, think about how much 100 points will do for your team in the overall standings on the leaderboard, especially in those lower standings at mid-20s. That's a good chunk of points to put you back up in that top 10, the top 15 if you can hang on.
And one of your favorite things to do, we've talked about it when you and I have done games and regionals, if you're not going to contend for the top 10 or maybe a podium spot, it's a chance for someone like Athletic or Tamaki to throw that hand grenade on the podium and see what could happen.
Yeah, well, an event like this is so specialized, and it's such a different test of fitness for the teams in general, is that it will change the leaderboard quite a bit if you just have one person who can't handle any portion of this. We haven't even talked about the run they have to do. They got a 2,000-meter run as a team. If you just, smoke one of your teammates into the ground during the swim and during the sled pull, well, good luck pulling them on the, when you get to the concrete. At least you can toss them on board, on top of the board if you need to. But once you get to that run, everybody needs to be on board in terms of what the pace is going to be.
CrossFit East, Tamaki out of Auckland, New Zealand. Rachel Palmer, one of their female athletes, a swim coach at HPK. And so obviously in New Zealand have a big swim background. They are a 3-time games team. New event wins. This could be their first event win. 35th a year ago, 36 and 16, 37th back in 2015.
See two different styles. Look at the forward part of your screen what that sled's doing. Nothing. It's just moving forward. But the back, we just saw, is getting jerked back and forth. And that's what I was talking about is the front swimmers are going to take a stroke with their offhand and then pull the sled up. The swimmers in the back should be taking a stroke with their offhand and pushing it forward. But if one's pushing and pulling at a different time, that's where you get that back and forth jostling you see on the right side of the sled versus that steady pace we see on the left.
Again, getting into the water with the sleds, Tabaki Athletic, Hustle Hard, Cape, and PBM. There's CrossFit Vondelgem. They've made a move once they've got onto the rescue sled. They have been able to swim their way up into third place right now. And you take a look at Lake Monona and the course they have to traverse. Everyone kind of separated, Chase, so it doesn't look like we'll have any issues of these rescue sleds, at least in Heat 1, getting jammed up around the buoys.
I mean, what we've seen in past events is that they start with the sled and they only have to go 100 meters around a buoy, and it would just mass traffic jams around these turns, and you can see them all spread out. There shouldn't be an issue with the turn, making that halfway point. One thing to kind of keep note of is that we've talked about the team unity that is forced upon these athletes with the worm. And things change, right? We've seen a lot of athletes kind of transfer back and forth. We saw it on the deadlift event, the very first event of the weekend, where athletes will kind of move places on the barbell. The same thing needs to happen on the sled. If you're holding onto the sled with one arm, you're not going to swim 500 meters with one side of your body. So what you should do is, and here's actually, thank you for doing this as we say it, is what Athletic is doing is they're rotating athletes around the sled. It's almost like, when you're doing the old sand volleyball and, someone serves and they move to the net and then they move to the left and they become the setter. For the sled itself is, hey, for 60 seconds or 50 strokes or whatever we decide, we're going to rotate around in a clockwise direction. And it doesn't matter if the guys are in front and the ladies are in the back, because we just saw, I believe, if the splits are correct on the individual side, is the women smoked the dudes on that 500-meter swim earlier this morning. So it's just if you are a strong swimmer or if you're not. And that constant rotation kind of alleviates fatiguing one side only.
So there, that wide shot, how big of a lead. They're starting to stretch out. Tabaki and Athletic, I believe 1-2-1 starting to get in there as well. We saw Vondelgem up in the top 5. See CrossFit Athletic right there in the middle of your screen, how far they are behind. And that's going to be, should be Tabaki on the left, about to get to that next buoy. Vondelgem on the right past the buoy. So 3 teams past that first buoy trying to get to the second. A lot of times we get these endurance events, Chase, and we say you cannot win it on the first segment of a longer event. In this one, you're a good swimming team. It's only a 2,000-meter run once they get back. It's not a 5 or a 10K. You come out with a minute or so lead. That's a very huge advantage on a run. Well, and it was, I don't think it was stated enough, and oftentimes not stated correctly, but it's like the swim is the event on the team side for this particular event today. More importantly, the rescue sled. It's so hard to navigate that as a unit, even if you're good swimmers in general. If you're not good swimmers and you're panicking in the water, you're breathing hard, there's little to no communication, that becomes the challenge. If you can get, you can easily put 2 minutes on somebody on the sled. There's not a bad technique. At least he's helping a little bit, but at least he's trying. But, what that is maybe they weren't the most confident swimmer in the first part and they got too tired. So I'll throw them on there. Like, if you're going to not pull your weight, then get on the sled and get out of the water. I think it's a good technique if that's something you need to do. Any advantage to have that athlete scoot back, chase, use the legs and kick, or would that slow him down as the stroke a little bit better? Does it really matter? If he's a good kicker, yes. You take 4 people and turn them into one body. Swimmers in general, we're not using the sled. We're just talking about one person. The power of the kick is an incredible advantage. When you're talking about the distance of 500 meters with this sled, we'll say this: something's better than nothing. So if you can paddle, great. If you can kick, great. Just don't sit there. I don't know. I don't want to sit there like Rose on the door in the Titanic, just making everybody else sit in the water while you do all the work. But
help your team out a little bit if you can.
It's a good thing that the 1-rep snatch is already done, because that would have been maybe an odd-looking snatch later today if not left shoulder. 20 minutes into this event, 40-minute time cap. This is heat 1 of 2 for Team Triplus. They've all completed the 500-meter swim. They're now on the sled paddle for 500 meters. Then they'll get on the 2,000-meter run back here to the North Park Stadium at the Alliant Energy Center.
I think the deceptive look as we see the difference in distance between the two teams is how much time that actually is. When you think about how slow these sleds are moving, 30 meters might be a minute. Now look how long it's been. It's been 20 minutes. Most of these teams started 10 minutes ago, and they're looping around on the halfway point. So the distance between the sleds doesn't really show the time that these teams have on each other.
Here's your leader, CrossFit East Tamaki. They battled with Athletic for a little while in 1-2-1, but the Tamaki has pulled away from Athletic and Vondeljim, who is in third. Then once they get back to the landing, get their shoes on, grab the rope, and they'll run back similar to what we saw in our battleground event. They'll all have to hold on to that rope. Some tight spots on the run course will be fun to watch. Could be some jockeying for position once we get there. So as you look at this, they went out. That's the top landing where these athletes took off on those blue mats. They'll come back in on the one closest to us. They'll make the exchange, and then they'll take off on the run. It's a pretty sizable lead there. That gives you a good idea how far Tamaki is ahead of the rest of the lead pack.
Well, the advantage, too, as you're coming in is what you don't see is how this run course unfolds when you start. They're going to take a couple turns right off the bat where they're out of sight within about 200 meters. The advantage there is that the other team, they know they're ahead, but you don't know how far ahead of you they are. So the desire to just want to chase a team down when you don't even know how far ahead they are. So getting through those turns when you can just get out of sight, it almost kind of seals the deal for your team.
Docks with inside, and momentarily to get shallow enough, they'll be able to stand up and walk it on in. Got a very sizable lead right now. And as you mentioned, Chase, earlier, you want that sled going the same direction, not the back two athletes yanking back and kind of doing that seesaw. They're pretty good rhythm right now.
And that's swimming in general. It's just finding a rhythm, staying in your lane, keeping a good technique, whether it's between your stroke, your kick, and your breathing, is that nothing really needs to be out of control. And if you lose control, especially in a lake or open water, there's a moment of panic that comes over people that don't have that comfortability in the water. As I said before, is that being comfortable and confident is almost more important than being fit enough to do these type of events in the water.
And so we're going to get out of the water. We'll make our way, get the shoes on, then to the rope, and then onto the run. 2,000-meter run, so a little bit over a mile back to the North Park Stadium at the Alliant Energy Center.
I mean, you just look at their faces in general, and they just seem like they were doing a casual swim in the water, right? They're not laboring. They just, like I said, it's that you find that tempo, you find that nice breathing rhythm, reaching forward, taking a breath, reaching forward, kicking your legs, and that just kind of nice, calm, rhythm and control. They look fantastic. They look the same out of the water on the 500-meter swim than they did here.
Just to give you an idea of the difference, they were out of the water on the free swim at 8:03.45, out of the water on the sled at 23:39.45. So the swim of the sled taking roughly about 15 or so minutes, at least for the lead teams. It's going to take a little bit longer for these teams that trail in the pack.
We touched on it earlier, is that the difference between what it looks distance-wise between teams and how long that takes to cover that distance between teams. Athletic was done almost a minute and a half. So that short 40-meter distance to 50-meter distance as Tamaki's getting out of the water, bottom part, middle part of the lake, almost 90 seconds difference between the two teams.
Tamaki out on the run, and Athletic now at 25:06.23 out of the water. So getting through the regular swim is Tamaki, Athletic, Hustle Hard, Cape, and PBM, your top 5. We'll see how that switches up as they come in. But the order so far has remained the same. Tamaki already on the run, Athletic about to get on the run. We'll see if Hustle Hard, Cape, and PBM are able to keep pace. Bondle Gym kind of creeped in there on the sled as well.
And this is some of that jamming up as we've seen. Good thing it's just at the docks when they're almost done. We would have seen a much more difficult transition when if we were hitting those turns on the end points of this swim. But just being here at the end part of the swim, it's not a big deal.
So 3 more teams will join East Tamaki and Athletic. It'll be Bondle Gym, Cape CrossFit, 2 of those 3 teams, and Butcher's Lab has made a move. So your top 5 right now: Tamaki, Athletic, Bondle Gym, Cape CrossFit, and CrossFit Butcher's Lab. And Tamaki, a sizable lead as you just saw there, and here come the rest of the teams. Here comes Athletic, so Tamaki a huge lead right now. Bondle Gym, Cape CrossFit, Butcher's Lab starting to make their way onto the run. Have to keep your hand on that rope. 2 athletes on either side.
Now, once they move to this run, the challenging part for these teams that are all coming out of the water together, as you just mentioned, is how to pace this run out against other teams with 3 other teammates. It's a lot different when you're running on your own and you can make some passes, but that communication is going to be even more important in terms of pacing and pushing. Is, do we hang back with this squad of 3 teams together, or do we get ahead? And I think what you want to do, at least at this point, knowing where you are with the rest of the field, is just kind of stay in that group for as long as you can if it's a pace you're comfortable with. Because at this point in time, you're not going to catch the first 2 teams at this point in time. So stay with those 3 you came out of the water with.
That's CrossFit Dwala. They just got out of the water. That team that just went on the run was CrossFit Asana out of Nyborg, Norway. So again, 7 teams now out of the water off the sled paddle onto the run. But again, it was Tamaki with that huge lead. There goes Dwala out of the Atlantic and Marietta, Georgia. And here comes heat 2 off to the left, encouraging heat number 1.
For a second, I was like,
hey, how's it going?
What are they doing?
On the backside of the 2,000-meter course before they make that left turn here in a little bit, they'll make that stretch run into the Alliant Energy Center, then loop around into the North Park Stadium.
I mean, this is just a 2,000-meter victory lap if you think about it. They put all the work in the 500-meter swim and in the 500-meter sled. We got half the field just making the turn or halfway through that last leg. So for Tamaki, I mean, you can just kind of coast your way through. You still got a lot of stuff left today and tomorrow. Just kind of keep peeking back. Understand one thing is that it is heat 1 of 2. So that's the thing you do need to be aware of, is that there's still 20 more teams that are watching this in terms of time and what it takes. So put up a good time. I think this time is going to stand pretty well for Tamaki.
Yeah, that's not where you want to be right there. We see several teams still in the water. It looks like 3 more teams about to make the dock and get onto the run. PBM and Fabrican are in as well. They'll be on their way to the run. About 10.5 minutes remaining in the 40-minute time cap. Again, this is heat number 1 of 2. The team Triplus here at the 2018 Reebok CrossFit Games. Here's a look at CrossFit East Tamaki and the lead. Not even another team in sight right now overhead. You see the North Park at the top right of your screen. So Tamaki making their way toward the North Park. They'll make the turn here soon onto the grass. A wild chase, that is quite a sizable lead. We knew how big of a lead it was coming out of the water, but when you get that type of perspective, the total dominance of East Tamaki in this event.
Like we said, it's close to 90 seconds, near about a 2-minute difference between them and Athletic. And if you think about that, that's a solid 400. I mean, if you're running pretty fast, but at least 300-meter lead you have on a team coming into the final 2,000 meters of this third portion of the event. So keep in mind is that, we said before is that, yes, this is a victory lap, quote unquote, for heat number 1. We still have a second heat left to go. So they do need to understand is that, yes, you're destroying heat 1, but you're good at this event. We still have 20 more teams to go.
A few more teams back at the dock have made it in, including Galileo, Hustle Hard, Invictus, and Norte Redondola are all in, but there are still several teams out in the water. That should be Norte Redondola on the way to the run. Invictus should be the team up ahead, and here is East Tamaki. Nice and comfortable as they'll make the turn back into the Alliant Energy Center and get ready to get into the back of the North Park Stadium.
And it's a good choice of words. I think it's time to get a little bit more uncomfortable because, get to the finish line. We have 20 more teams waiting. We have the best teams, the fittest teams still left to go. Now, how that relates to their swimming prowess, I don't know yet once they get to the water. But, being this far ahead sometimes is a disadvantage being in heat number 1.
There's no doubt it helps to be able to look around and see some other competitors kind of give you that push. But 20 more teams, those are the top 20 teams, and Tamaki trying to break into the top 20. Came in at 33rd overall.
I think one thing to think about is the question of, why this test is so important for these teams. Look at the clock in the left corner of your screen. We're talking north of 30 minutes of just constant movement. Swim's challenging. It's technically difficult. You got the sled. That's teamwork. Also technically challenging, even though you get to pull a sled and, quote, rest your body. And then you have this team roped run for over 2,000 meters. Like, this is a fantastic test of not just, your physical ability, but your psychological ability as well. It's a long, grueling event. And then that teamwork on the sled and that teamwork towards the end is so important, is that these are type of tests that are so necessary on other levels other than just, a barbell and pull-ups. But these long endurance tests are totally necessary and vital to test the fittest teams on Earth.
They'll come into a nice cheer here at the North Park Stadium as they are all alone, and that's one advantage of being so far ahead. All the cheers are for you as you make that final right turn and the run, the sprint toward the finish line. The final 44 feet, and they are right now your leaders. 33-26-7-4 for CrossFit East Tamaki. The absolute dominating performance here in the team Triplus in heat number 1. How dominant, Chase, there are teams, or at least a team, still in the water back in Monona. We'll be looking for Athletic, Bondel, Jump, Cape, Butcher's Lab, a sign of the teams that got out trailing after Tamaki. So here comes CrossFit Athletic. The 3 event wins in the past have involved the swim. They're going to have at least a second place through 1 heat as they're making their way back onto the north pad here at the stadium. Behind the stadium right now, they will come in all alone as well. Final turn into the stadium for Athletic. Well, Chase, we go in heats in almost every event, just 2 heats here, but in a more, as you've said, kind of specialized event with that swim, you can get heat number 2 a little panicked. If they're chasing a fast time, they're not great swimmers. If someone's maybe not a great swimmer, pushing it maybe way ahead of the pace that they should be, but Athletic's going to come in, and those teams back at the dock will know it's about 35 minutes, 31 for the best team here, 33 for East Tamaki. If you're doing a more traditional type of event, you don't maybe get in that panic mode by the time to beat in the first heat.
No, but, I mean, you got 2 teams, 3 teams. I mean, look, you got Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. I mean, these are teams that have experience just by location in general with the water and open water swimming, and it shows.
Top 3, Tamaki Athletic and Cape CrossFit are your top 3, and Butcher's Lab in 4th place. About 4 minutes to go here in the 40-minute time cap. So you're going to have several teams get capped out, it looks like. Teams coming in one by one. Haven't had that big sprint yet here in Heat 1. Although there's a team trailing here. Could have our first sprint to the finish line. About a 60 or 70-foot lead. Stretching that up to about 80 right now. CrossFit Asana just finished out of Spain. Here comes your 6th place team to finish. CrossFit Bonalgem, who at one point in the water held a 3rd place position, but 36.27 for Bonalgem. Asana got in just ahead at 36.21. So we'll have a 7th team come in now and finish. So that may be Douala. And it is at 36.47.05. So you have 7 of the 19 teams in heat number 1 who have completed the course, completed this event. You know, Chase, it pays to finish within the time cap if you're doing the swimming running events, because you're still going to have to walk back to the stadium anyway.
You're going 2,000 meters no matter how fast or slow you're going, regardless of the time cap. It's not like, you know, Dave Cash is going to send out the card out there to pick up the lost teams that didn't finish.
Just over 2.5 minutes remaining in the 40-minute time cap for heat number 1. CrossFit PBM. PBM out of Pretoria, South Africa. They were 4th in the Meridian. Back at the games in 2014 where they finished 42nd overall. Fabriken. They'll make that turn and get set to come to the stadium here momentarily. Again, it's East Tamaki Athletic, Cape CrossFit, Butcher's Lab, Asana, Bonalgem, and Douala all have completed. So 7 teams will have an 8th, potentially a 9th here with just under 2 minutes remaining. And here comes CrossFit Fabriken. Out of Malmo, Sweden. 9th place team back in 2015, 20th a season ago here in Madison. 4th in the Europe Regional as they'll make the final run down the straightaway here at the North Park Stadium. Fabriken is in. Right around 38.45, 38.40.48 is the official time, with PBM the next team to come in. They'll switch up a little bit on the rope. Less than a minute to go. So they'll have to loop around the stadium, get in. They should have plenty of, I don't want to speak too soon, plenty of time. They got 40 seconds making that final turn before they come through the tunnel. Less than 30 seconds remain. 25 seconds to go. 15 seconds remain for PBM. And they have become the 9th team to finish the team Triplus here in heat number 1. And there is the time cap. A couple teams make it into the stadium, but they will cap out. So we end up seeing, Chase, 9 teams finish heat number 1. But as you had mentioned, it's going to be the swim. The teams that are good at swimming are going to get out, and it's only 2,000 meters back to the North Park Stadium.
Well, I think the interesting part about this event in general is we were talking about how, teams trying to maybe take down Mayhem can make the jump. In traditional events, it's not really going to happen. Mayhem doesn't really make mistakes like that. With something like a swim, I don't think they'll have a problem with the swim. But if you have one person that can't do something in an event like this, you can't make up for it as the other 3 members of your team. So if you just can't do a swim well, it's not just finishing 5th when you should have been 3rd or 10th when you should have been 8th. You can look at a bottom 30, bottom 40 type finish.
Here we go, back to the water. We are ready to get started. Heat number 2, and they'll be chasing East Tamaki. And here are the teams that will be in this heat, led by CrossFit Mayhem Freedom. First place overall with 454 points. Reebok CrossFit won there in 6th, trying to make a move today on moving day. Yesterday we got into position. Now we see if they can make a move on Lake Monona here in Madison, Wisconsin for team event number 6, heat number 2.
Mayhem sitting there with nearly a 100-point lead at the halfway point of the CrossFit Games, but there's a cluster of from 2nd to about 6th place where they're only separated by about 20 points in total. So as far as podiums positions, there's a lot that can go on, but Mayhem, it looks like they're sitting pretty comfortable in that first place position with halfway to go.
Well, they'll be chasing East Tamaki. You had the 33-26-7-4. The next grouping all finished between 35 and 35 and a half minutes, so that's an indication of the pace they need to be on. And if they want to make a run at that, they're going to have to be out of the water with the sled about 23:40 if they want to make a run at East Tamaki. First event of Saturday. These are your top 20 teams here in heat number 2. Now, Chase, couldn't ask maybe for a better day if you're a fan, but as you mentioned, we talked about it being 84 degrees. Your outside temperature, your water temperature was sitting at 76. So it's a little bit different if you're the one doing the work.
Yeah, but you think water temperature, that sounds very nice, but water temperature versus air temperature, and I don't want to get too nerdy, but the water temperature, you feel so much more drastic change in just single degrees than you do with, typical air temperature. It almost feels like a 10-degree change, just going from like 76 degrees in the water to 72. 76 is a pretty warm water temp for those that are kind of used to swimming in general. But what isn't kind of the picture is that run is a hot run, right? That sun is beating down. There are no clouds, so 84 sounds nice. We even have a little bit of a breeze. But we're just standing out in the stands just by ourselves, and it gets hot when you're just sitting there in the sun.
That's how far they'll have to go from the lake over here to the Allied Energy Center, as there's the North Park Stadium just off to the right now, coming into the center of your screen. They'll make that run around the park and into the stadium. Got about a minute until the start here of heat number 2. It is event 6, the